Thanks, Jeff.
Well, thank you guys. We decided to take the couches, not just because they're more comfortable and to give the view a run, though I don't look like Whoopi Goldberg, but as I tweeted earlier, I'm going to tap into my inner Whoopi. I'm not sure what that means, but because I want this to be, we're going to talk about a conversation. We're going to talk about the church, but we're going to talk about even bigger than that, a conversation. So this is unscripted. We've got a few things that we want to make sure we hit, but we're just going to have a conversation and hope you guys can join along.
And before we saw each other yesterday, our face-to-face contact had been 2 minutes at SopCon back in May. So this really is a now kind of thing. But I want to start with a story. Jesus went to Becky's house and was sitting on her back porch and looking out over that wheat field in Oklahoma. And 5,000 of her closest friends, which is the whole town of Alva, came over and are sitting there, and Jesus says, okay, look at that field. Let me tell you a story. He said, a farmer takes a bag of seed, kind of like this, and he goes broadcasting with the seeds. That's what you call it. You grab a handful and you spread it out. Some of it falls on the path that cuts through the field that people use as a shortcut, and birds come and eat it up. And some of it falls in the rocks, and it sort of sprouts and burns up. And some of it falls into the weeds, and it sprouts up a little bit, and then the weeds get bigger because the weeds in Oklahoma are great. And some of it falls on the good soil, and that stuff that falls on the good soil, where a handful fell, they were able to harvest about 100 handfuls of it. So everybody says, wow, that was a really good story. Obvious, but really good story. And later, the 12 disciples say, okay, Jesus, what did it mean? I mean, it had to mean something cool. Well, for Jesus, he talked about the soil part. But that's not what most of his disciples took away from it. What most of his disciples took away from it was, oh, this is about broadcasting. And so what they figured that he said was, guys, I'm sorry, for the next 1,439 years you're going to be stuck. But then they're going to help Gutenberg invent the printing press, and then we can spread the seeds all over the place. And then Marconi and some other people are going to argue about who's first, but we're going to have radio, because that will be marvelous for spreading the seeds everywhere. And then somebody's going to make up television, and it's going to be even better. And TV preachers can be there for Randy Lawrence to watch last night when he couldn't go to sleep. It will be perfect. And somehow, what we've done is we've thought the point of the story was broadcasting.
Yeah, and we've been stuck there. I mean, we've been stuck ever since Gutenberg. Beautiful invention, we're all excited about it, but we've been stuck there. We've had this real linear thought process. I mean, we're here in Detroit, and we've become very, very assembly line. I mean, even our churches all look alike. I mean, we get there, we have music, we have greeting, we have preaching, we have an altar call, and then we go home. It's this linear thinking that we've been stuck on. The good news is we now have this tool, social media. Now, we had the tool called the internet, but even websites we used as broadcasts and just put out the information. But just like, and what I love about this crowd is I can say some of these words, you guys actually, mostly I'm speaking to churches and pastors and their eyes glaze over, but I can speak to some things, you guys have been there and used them, but it's like the internet. We started off with BBSs. You guys, who all had BBS? There you go. See, I love that. So we started off with BBSs. That's where I first got into it. I was an internet.com kid, whatever, in the garage with whole bit. Scrape my monitor every morning because it was too cold in Michigan. But we started off with BBSs, and it was all about community and connecting and sharing. And then came this thing called the information superhighway. And then we turned it into broadcast. Getting out information. And now we're back full circle to social media. We're once again about community and connecting and sharing. And we're seeing the same thing within the church. We're now beginning to engage, we're beginning to have conversations, and we're beginning to move away from broadcast, and we're getting into community. Which is great.
Sorry, I'm a pastor, so my eyes were glazing over.
Yeah, see, it's the PBSs. Yeah.
We saw Becky Johns backstage, and Becky, within the last month, wrote a marvelous post that talked about the conversation versus a conversation. And what she said is we work really hard to get into the conversation. So all of us, businesses, churches, whatever, say, oh, we need to get into social media, so we need to get on Facebook so that we're part of the conversation. And Becky said, what happens is, or what ought to happen, what happens to her is to move into having a conversation. To have it be, to take advantage of the technology and to do the one-on-one conversations that come out of that. I was laughing about it a little bit ago, realizing that when I applied for my current job, among my references were a couple of Twitter friends. Because I figured they know how I talk to like normal people, as opposed to church people. Although, is Rob normal? I don't know, but still. And as I think about social media, and as I think about the idea of moving toward conversation, I realized that Jesus is the ultimate social medium. To call him a medium probably is an interesting concept, but what he does is he takes word and puts on flesh and walks around, so that all of a sudden this word thing becomes conversational, becomes interactive. And so when I start thinking about churches doing social media, and Michael does way more talking to churches, I do way more talking outside of churches about church stuff, explaining it. What happens is it becomes conversational, it becomes interactive, it becomes not the church tweeting, but John, who is part of it, talking about church stuff, and providing the opportunity for somebody to say, okay, what does that mean? I heard it when I was in Sunday school and when I was 3, and it was really stupid, and everybody said, well, don't ask those questions. Social media allows us to ask those questions.
And those questions are good. And it's one of the things that whenever I consult with a church, especially when we talk about social media, but in general as well, but especially social media, Twitter, Facebook, the one thing that as I look at their flow of information on either of those tools, I say the problem glaringly is that I see more periods than I do question marks. We have to begin to put question marks. We have to ask questions. You know, we talked about the parable of the sower and all that, and then later on, they corner Jesus. They being the religious people, the pastors, the priests of today, the ones that had it all together.
I didn't.
You didn't?
No.
Oh. Probably busy that day. And they cornered him and said, "What's the greatest commandment?" Now they were trying to corner him, they're trying to get him in trouble. But he didn't talk about buildings, he didn't talk about churches, he didn't talk about organizations, he didn't talk about denominations. He was real simple. And he said, love God and love people, and left it at that. And that's where that full circle is seen. That's where we're going, that's where we're heading. It's not just the church, because now it's not about the church. He doesn't say love God and love the church. He says love God and love people. And that's what it's about. It's about people. That's why we're all here. We're not talking about organizations, though we're all attached to them. We're talking about people. So now when I say, well, as a church, we need to make sure we're tweeting about this, or church, we need to make sure this is on, it's not about the church being on Twitter. It's not about the church being on Facebook. It's about Michael and John and Jackie and Joe being on Twitter and Facebook. So I hope that this is the beginning of that conversation. I hope that we begin to engage. I hope that the church begins to ask questions and open themselves up and say, let's talk about faith and our life and how we live all this thing out. And I understand that you think differently than me, and so does she, but let's talk about that. Let's struggle through it together. Let's wrestle with it in a positive way and have those engagements and those conversations.
Apparently we're on forever now, since we're talking about eternal things, because the clock went out. So does Jesus...
Dear Jesus, I hear you. You like it. All right, we'll keep going.
Why does Jesus hate papyrus?
You know, it's kind of funny. Jesus hates papyrus I had the back. I'm a designer, right? So I had the backside of my business card, and I had to throw something out there. So I put Jesus Hates Papyrus on it because Jesus, we always talk about John 3:16, God so loved the world, etc. Well, Revelations 3:16 says you might be sick and vomit sometimes because of the mediocrity that we see in the church. So that's what we do. I mean, that's why I started Holy Cow, was to get out of this mediocrity mode, to begin to have conversations and to begin to communicate in a great way. I focus on the how that we're doing church and the art of church and things of that sort. So he hates papyrus because it's just blah and mediocre, and delete it off of all of your computers, please. Along with Comic Sans.
Oh, I was going to say, can we use Comic Sans instead?
No Comic Sans.
What about parchment?
Yeah. Well, we're going to pretend like it's 0. Oh, we have 4 minutes. Well.
Oh, cool.
I don't know. I got nothing else. What do you got? What do you want to talk about?
I don't know. We could talk about everything we talked about last night in an hour and a half. Social media chaplain is, I'll talk about that because you could ask about that.
So tell me, you says there on social, what is actually is a social media chaplain?
When I was at SobCon a couple of years ago, I realized that I hated the idea of being an evangelist. And if I talked about myself as a social media pastor, everybody said, what's a pastor? I realized that in the same way that fire departments have chaplains and police departments have chaplains and corporations have chaplains, that social media could have a chaplain too. To have somebody that you can ask questions of kind of offline. And I realized that for me, it's my version of Becky's The Conversation becoming a conversation, or rather, a conversations. And it was a domain that was free because nobody had ever heard of it before. So.
Well, and it's great, it's so, and that's what I love. I'm more of a Twitter guy than I'm a Facebook guy, which is good because I'm at the 140 conference, not the Facebook conference. My wife is much more, hi honey, if you're home, although we have a sick baby at home, so sorry about that. Not sure if I'm gonna make it home tonight now, but what I love about Twitter and Facebook, but especially Twitter, is it's so on. I mean, that's what we're talking about. The other day I see someone in my stream that says, man, I can't believe this is happening. This is the one thing I don't want to happen. Pound alone. And so I could reach out to him with a simple DM, says, dude, you all right? And we don't have a long history. He's not a best friend. I didn't even have his phone number at the time. He's like, I'm just having a tough week. So we then took it offline. Please don't only do it on Twitter. Get offline, pick up a phone every now and then. And we could have a conversation, and we could connect, and we could help. We didn't fix the world. We didn't change all those problems. But a person to a person connected and had communion that day together because of it. So that's the beauty of it, if we'll have those conversations and dare to be transparent and open.
Two last things. One, 140church.com, and you see our links. And when was the last time a pastor finished early?